He had pictured her as a soft-spoken little thing, with dainty hands for tending his vegetable patch, and a gentle voice to soothe the quiet nights on his lonesome ranch. But when the wagon dust cleared, Jasper Cole found himself staring up at a woman who could probably toss him over her shoulder like a sack of flour. Lila Kane stood 6 feet tall in her dusty boots, with shoulders wider than most men in town and hands that looked more suited to breaking horses than sipping tea. The letter in his pocket felt like a bad joke, and the cedar ring he'd carved for her seemed laughably small. 3 months back, Jasper had placed an ad in the Prairie Herald with trembling hands. Hard-working rancher seeks gentle companion for frontier life. Must love simple joys and quiet evenings. Just one reply came, in careful, elegant script that spoke of loneliness as deep as his own. Lila's letters painted visions of shared suppers and heartfelt talks. Someone who knew the heavy silence of a frontier homestead. Not once did she mention she was taller than his barn door. Silas Boone, the merchant who'd set up the meeting, climbed down from the wagon, clearing his throat nervously. His eyes flicked between Jasper's stunned face and Lila's towering frame. Lila herself seemed just as thrown, her bold stance faltering as she sized up Jasper's wiry build, his head barely reaching her chin. The three of them stood frozen in the dusty yard, like actors who'd lost their script. The silence stretched until it stung. Jasper felt the neighbors' eyes, nosy folks who'd gathered to see his mail-order bride arrive. Mrs. Larson from the general store muttered behind her hand to her husband. Young Jimmy Tate pointed until his ma yanked his arm down. The whole scene felt like a circus gone wrong, and Jasper's face burned hotter than the noon sun. Lila spoke first, her voice deeper than he'd expected, but kind. "You must be Jasper." Her hand engulfed his, her grip firm yet careful, like she knew her strength. "I suppose we should talk." Her tone hinted at the same doubts racing through his mind. Silas, sensing the tension, scrambled to unload Lila's trunk. A beast of a thing that dwarfed Jasper's expectations, much like the woman herself. His hurried movements screamed discomfort with the awkward mess he'd helped create. But as Jasper watched, Lila surveyed his modest ranch with genuine curiosity, not disdain. She didn't scoff at the plain cabin or the patched corral fence. Instead, she nodded at his tidy garden and neat firewood stack, her approval catching him off guard. Despite her size, she carried a grace he hadn't expected from someone who could snap him like a twig. The next morning brought a crisis neither saw coming. Jasper's prize bull, Thunder, a 2,000-pound brute, had smashed through the corral's toughest posts overnight. Now he stood in Mrs. Larson's prized flower garden 3 homesteads over, trampling her roses into the dirt. Her furious yells echoed across the valley, loud enough to rattle the windows. Jasper stood on his porch, wringing his hands as the disaster unfolded. Thunder was meaner than a rattlesnake on a bad day, and he'd already sent 2 neighbors scrambling over fences in a panic. This was the kind of scandal that'd haunt Jasper for years, a public humiliation in front of the whole settlement. "Bow, you can't rope him from here," Lila said, appearing beside him, moving quiet as a shadow for someone her size. Her eyes locked on Thunder, reading him like a book. "Those fools down there'll get trampled if they keep charging at him head-on." Jasper nodded, miserable. "Thunder's always been a handful, but this is new. I don't know what's got into him." Truth was, he'd been dreading this since he bought the bull. He lacked the brawn to handle such a beast, and everyone knew it, making this mess all the more embarrassing. Without a word, Lila stepped off the porch, striding toward the chaos with long, steady steps. Jasper hurried after her, his short legs pumping. "Lila, wait! He's dangerous when he's riled." But she was halfway across the field, her eyes fixed on Thunder like nothing else existed. As they reached Mrs. Larson's property, the damage was clear. Roses crushed, border stones scattered, years of work ruined. Mrs. Larson stood on her steps, red-faced, screaming, "That monster's destroyed my garden, Jasper Cole. You'll pay for every flower, you hear me? You got no business keeping beasts you can't control." The neighbors nodded, some sympathetic, others smirking. Lila ignored them all, studying Thunder with a focus that silenced the crowd. The bull pawed the ground near a wrecked rose bush, head low, ready to charge. Two men with ropes stood back, too scared to move closer. Then Lila did the unthinkable. She climbed the fence and walked straight toward the beast, hands empty. Steps slow but sure. The yard went dead quiet. Even Mrs. Larson's jaw dropped. Thunder's head swung toward Lila, his eyes wild, nostrils flaring. Jasper's throat closed up, his instincts screaming to stop her. But something in her calm kept him rooted. She spoke to the bull, her voice low and soothing, like a lullaby over a storm. "Easy, big fellow," she murmured, just loud enough for Jasper to catch. "You ain't really mad, are you? Just lost and far from home." Thunder's pawing slowed, his ears twitching toward her. The crowd held its breath as Lila stepped closer, her hand outstretched, palm up. Jasper's heart pounded. She was 10 feet from those deadly horns, trapped in the fenced garden. But Thunder didn't charge. His breathing steadied, his stance softening. Lila reached out, her hand finding his neck behind his ear. The bull sighed, leaning into her touch like a giant puppy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Fetch a lead rope," Lila called, eyes still on Thunder. Silas ran off, returning with a rope from Jasper's barn. Lila tied a halter with slick, practiced moves, and soon she led Thunder out of the garden, docile as a lamb. The neighbors parted like the Red Sea, staring in awe. Mrs. Larson stood speechless, her tirade dead. As Lila passed Jasper, she gave him a small smile that softened her strong features. "Your fence has a weak post on the south side," she said, casual, as if taming bulls was her morning routine. "We ought to fix that before he wanders again." By noon, word of Lila's feat spread like wildfire. Neighbors flocked to Jasper's ranch, hiding their curiosity behind casseroles and advice. They watched Lila work with Jasper on the fence, her sledgehammer driving posts deep with single swings. Among them was Elias Holt, a bear of a man who'd always made Jasper feel small. He brought his 3 sons, who eyed Lila like she was a tall tale come to life. "Heard your ladies got away with bulls," Elias drawled, leaning on a post. His sons stood behind him, gawking as Lila hammered. "Must be nice, having her handle things." The jab hit hard, questioning Jasper's worth next to Lila's strength. Jasper's neck burned, his own doubts echoing Elias's words. Lila looked up, sweat on her brow. "Grew up on a cattle ranch in Dakota," she said, cool as a breeze. "Animals ain't so tough once you know 'em." She went back to work, brushing off Elias's dig. Elias's eldest, Caleb, a strapping 19-year-old, stepped up, all swagger. "Need help with that hammer, ma'am? Looks heavy." Lila's eyes flicked to him, polite but firm. "Got my rhythm, thanks. Jasper could use a hand with the wire." Caleb's face reddened, his pride stung. Elias's other boys swapped confused looks, unsure how to handle a woman who needed no help. Jasper's gut twisted. He was proud of Lila's skill, but worried it made him look weak. That evening, Jasper and Lila sat on the porch, the silence heavy as a storm cloud. The day's chaos, her arrival, the bull, the stairs, left Jasper reeling, doubting his place beside her. Lila broke the quiet, her voice weary. "This ain't what you expected, is it?" She stared at the horizon, her strong profile lit by starlight. Nothing like the delicate woman he'd imagined. Jasper shifted, the chair creaking under his slight frame. "I should have been clearer in my ad," he said, voice low. "I'm smaller than most. Not cut out for this life sometimes." Lila turned, her gaze sharp but warm. "And what?" "That I'm tired of being a spectacle. Too big, too strong for most folks' liking." Her honesty cut deep, demanding his own. "I feel like I ain't enough," he admitted. "Not strong enough, not big enough, not man enough for this ranch." Lila's fingers tapped her chair, her voice softening. "You know what I saw today? A man who cared more about my safety than his pride. Most would have tried to stop me, even if it got him hurt." Jasper's chest loosened, her words sinking in. "I should have said I'm tired of being a challenge," Lila added. "Folks always think I need someone to prove themselves against me." Her words shifted Jasper's view. She carried her own burdens, her own loneliness. Lila pulled out a worn letter. His letter. "You wrote about partnership, two people making each other stronger, not smaller." Jasper remembered those words, penned with foolish hope. "I meant it," he said, "but I don't know how to live it." He nodded at the fence, where her skill outshone his. Lila tucked the letter away, other letters peeking from her pocket, kept and reread. "You didn't run to Elias for help," she said. "You came to me. That says something about you." Jasper's heart stirred. He hadn't realized he'd trusted her instinctually. "So what now?" he asked. Lila smiled faintly. "We try. We figure out what partnership means for us." The stars glowed brighter, and for the first time, Jasper felt a spark of hope. The stars hung low over Jasper Cole's ranch, casting a silver glow on the porch where he and Lila Kane sat, their words still lingering like smoke from a dying fire. Jasper's admission of feeling not enough, and Lila's own confession of being tired of being a spectacle, had cracked open something raw between them. They'd agreed to try, to figure out what partnership could mean for two folks who didn't fit the usual mold. But as the night deepened, a new challenge was brewing, one that'd test their fragile bond in ways neither could have guessed. Jasper shifted in his chair, the cedar ring still tucked in his pocket, its small size a reminder of how wrong he'd been about Lila's hands. "You kept my letters," he said, nodding at the folded papers peeking from her dress pocket. "Why?" Lila's fingers brushed the worn edges, her face softening in the moonlight. "They felt honest," she said. "Most folks write what they think you want to hear. You wrote what you felt." Her words stirred something in Jasper, a mix of hope and fear that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Before he could answer, the faint thud of hooves broke the quiet. A rider approached, silhouetted against the starry sky. Silas Boone, the merchant, reined in his horse, his face tight with urgency. "Jasper! Lila!" he called, dismounting fast. "There's trouble at the Larson place. Thunder's not the only problem tonight." Jasper's stomach dropped. Mrs. Larson's ruined garden was bad enough, but Silas's tone hinted at something worse. "What's happened?" Lila asked, standing, her height casting a long shadow. Silas wiped sweat from his brow despite the cool night. "It's the water well on Larson's land," he said. "Found it fouled this evening. Muddy. Smells like rot. Folks think it's sabotage, and they're pointing fingers at you, Jasper, saying Thunder's rampage was a distraction." Jasper's jaw tightened. "That's nonsense," he snapped. "Why would I ruin her well?" Silas shrugged, uneasy. "Folks are riled. They're meeting at the town hall now, demanding answers." The news hit Jasper like a kick from thunder. A fouled well wasn't just a nuisance. It could cripple a homestead in this dry country. Mrs. Larson's accusations were spreading, and with the neighbors already buzzing about Lila's bull taming, this could turn their curiosity into suspicion. Lila's eyes narrowed, her voice steady. "We'd best go see what's what," she said, already moving toward the barn. No sense letting rumors fester. They saddled up, Jasper on his reliable mare, Lila on a borrowed gelding that looked small under her frame. The ride to town was tense, the night air thick with the weight of what awaited. Redstone Creek's town hall was a simple wooden building, but tonight it glowed with lantern light and bristled with angry voices. As Jasper and Lila dismounted, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, eyes darting between Jasper's slight figure and Lila's towering presence. Inside, Mrs. Larson stood at the front, her face still red from the day's disaster. "Jasper Cole!" she barked as they entered. "Your bull wrecked my garden, and now my well's poisoned. You expect us to believe that's coincidence?" The crowd nodded, their faces a mix of doubt and anger. Elias Holt, the burly rancher, leaned forward, his voice low but sharp. "Seems convenient, Cole. You've been struggling with that ranch. Maybe you thought ruining Larson's land would give you an edge." Jasper's hands clenched, his voice shaking with indignation. "I'd never do such a thing. Thunder broke out, sure, but I didn't touch your well." Lila stepped forward, her presence silencing the room. "Hold on," she said, her deep voice cutting through the tension. "You got proof Jasper did this? Or are you just throwing blame 'cause it's easy?" Mrs. Larson faltered, but her eyes stayed hard. "Who else would it be? He's got motive. Everyone knows his ranch ain't thriving." Jasper felt the room closing in, the neighbors' stares like needles. His ranch was modest, sure, but he'd worked hard to keep it afloat since his wife passed 2 years ago. The idea that he'd sabotage a neighbor was absurd, but doubt was a dangerous thing in a small town. Lila's hand brushed his arm, a small gesture that steadied him. "Let's see the well," she said to Mrs. Larson. "If it's foul, there'll be signs, tracks, maybe something left behind. You don't mind us looking, do you?" Mrs. Larson hesitated, then nodded sharply. "Fine, but don't think you can cover your tracks now." The crowd followed as Jasper, Lila, and Silas rode back to Larson's property, the night heavy with suspicion. The well sat near the edge of her land, a simple stone ring surrounded by churned-up dirt from Thunder's earlier rampage. The water inside was murky, a sour stench rising from it. Jasper's heart sank. This looked bad, real bad. Lila knelt by the well, her eyes scanning the ground like a tracker. She dipped a hand into the water, sniffed it, and frowned. "This ain't just mud," she said, her voice low. "Smells like oil or tar, something deliberate." She stood, pointing to faint boot prints in the soft earth nearby, too small to be hers or Jasper's. "These ain't from today," she said. "Someone was here after Thunder ran through." The crowd murmured, some looking uneasy, others still glaring at Jasper. Elias Holt crossed his arms, his tone skeptical. "Could be anyone's prints. Don't mean Jasper's innocent." Lila's eyes flashed, but she kept her cool. "Then let's find out who," she said. "Jasper, you got a lantern?" He nodded, fetching one from his saddlebag. Lila lit it, the glow revealing more tracks leading toward a patch of scrub brush. She followed them, Jasper close behind, the crowd trailing like wary shadows. In the brush, Lila found something that made Jasper's blood run cold. A torn piece of cloth, dark blue with a distinctive red stitch, caught on a thorn. Jasper's breath caught. He knew that pattern. It matched the shirt of Caleb Holt, Elias's eldest son, who'd been sniffing around Lila that morning, offering help she didn't need. Lila held up the cloth, her face unreadable. Anyone recognize this? She asked, her voice carrying a quiet challenge. The crowd went silent, eyes darting to Elias and Caleb. Caleb's face paled, his bravado gone. Elias stepped forward, his voice gruff. "That's my boy's shirt, but it don't prove nothing. Could have torn it any time." Lila's eyes locked on Caleb, sharp as a hawk's. "Maybe," she said, "but these tracks match his boots. Same size, same tread. Care to explain, Caleb?" The young man stammered, his eyes darting to his father. I wasn't here last night," he blurted, too quick, his voice cracking. Jasper's mind raced. Caleb had been at the ranch earlier. His pride stung when Lila brushed him off. Could he have fouled the well out of spite? Or worse, to frame Jasper? The thought felt like a punch. Elias's family had land nearby, and bad blood had simmered since Jasper outbid them for his ranch years ago. Lila's calm voice cut through his thoughts. "We'll need more than cloth to settle this," she said, "but it's a start. Let's check the well again tomorrow. Daylight. Might find more." The crowd dispersed, grumbling but subdued, leaving Jasper and Lila alone by the well. Silas lingered, his face uneasy. "That was bold, Lila," he said, "calling out Caleb like that. Elias won't take kindly to it." Lila shrugged, her expression steady. "Truth don't care about kindly. If Caleb's guilty, we'll prove it." Jasper's chest tightened with a mix of gratitude and worry. Lila's courage was undeniable, but stirring up trouble with the Holts could make their lives harder. Back at the ranch, they sat on the porch again, the air heavier than before. Jasper's hands fidgeted, the cedar ring still in his pocket. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Stand up for me like that." Lila's eyes met his, firm but warm. "Wasn't just for you," she said. "I came here for a fresh start, same as you. I'm not letting small-town grudges ruin it." Her words hit Jasper hard, reminding him of her letters, her longing for a place where she could be more than a curiosity. Lila pulled out another of Jasper's letters, unfolding it carefully. "You wrote something else I liked," she said, her voice soft. "That a real home ain't built on appearances, but on trust." Jasper swallowed, his throat tight. "I meant it," he said. "But trust's hard when folks are pointing fingers." Lila nodded, her fingers tracing the letter's creases. "Then we build it ourselves, starting now. You with me?" Jasper looked at her. Really looked, seeing past her height to the strength in her eyes. Strength that wasn't just physical, but something deeper. Something he wanted to learn from. "I'm with you," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. Lila's smile was small but real, a promise of something worth fighting for. But as they sat under the stars, Jasper couldn't shake the feeling that Caleb's torn shirt was just the beginning of something bigger, something that could threaten everything they were trying to build. Dawn broke over Jasper Cole's ranch, painting the Montana sky in streaks of gold and pink. The air still carried the weight of last night's accusations, the fouled well, the torn cloth pointing to Caleb Holt, and the neighbors' suspicious glares. Jasper and Lila Kane had agreed to face the truth together, to build trust in a town quick to judge. But as they prepared to head back to Mrs. Larson's well, a knot of worry twisted in Jasper's gut. The truth could clear his name, or tear apart the fragile bond he and Lila were starting to forge. Jasper saddled his mare while Lila checked the gelding's tack, her movements steady despite the tension. "You think Caleb did it?" Jasper asked, his voice low. Lila's eyes met his, sharp but thoughtful. "Tracks and a torn shirt ain't proof," she said. "But they're a trail. We follow it. We find answers." Her calm grounded him, but the thought of confronting Elias Holt and his son made Jasper's hands shake as he tightened the cinch. They rode to Mrs. Larson's property, the morning sun glinting off the well's stone rim. A small crowd had already gathered. Mrs. Larson, Silas Boone, Elias Holt, and a handful of neighbors, their faces a mix of curiosity and distrust. Caleb stood behind his father, his jaw tight, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Jasper felt the weight of their stares, but Lila's presence beside him was like a shield, her height and confidence drawing every eye. Mrs. Larson crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Well, Jasper Cole, you here to confess, or just waste our time?" Jasper's cheeks burned, but Lila stepped forward before he could speak. "We're here to find the truth," she said, her deep voice cutting through the murmurs. "Let's check the well and those tracks again. Daylight don't lie." The crowd parted as she strode to the well, Jasper at her side, Silas trailing with a lantern despite the morning light. Lila knelt, inspecting the well's edge. The water was still murky, the sour smell stronger in the crisp air. She ran her fingers along the stones, pausing at a smear of dark, sticky residue. "This ain't natural," she said, holding up her hand to show a faint sheen of oil. "Someone poured something in here. Coal oil, maybe, or lamp tar." She pointed to the boot prints from last night, clearer now in the sunlight, leading back to the scrub brush where they'd found Caleb's torn cloth. Elias Holt's face darkened. "You're reaching, woman," he growled. "Those prints could be anyone's." Leela stood, her full height making Elias shift uncomfortably. "They match Caleb's boots," she said, calm but firm. "And this cloth," she held up the blue fabric with red stitching, "came from his shirt. You want to explain, Caleb? Or keep hiding behind your paw?" The crowd's whispers grew louder, eyes locking on the young man. Caleb's face went white, his voice cracking. "I told you I wasn't here." But his eyes flicked to the ground, where the prints stood out stark against the dirt. Jasper's heart pounded. This was the moment that could clear his name or spark a feud with the Holts that'd last years. Lila's hand brushed his, a quiet signal to stay steady. "Then let's test it," she said. "Caleb, step in the dirt here. If your boots don't match, you're clear." The crowd held its breath as Caleb hesitated, his father's glare boring into him. Finally, he stepped forward, planting his boot beside the tracks. The tread matched perfectly. Same size, same worn heel. Mrs. Larson gasped, and Elias's face turned red. "This proves nothing," he roared, but his voice shook. Caleb's shoulders slumped, and he muttered, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." The words hit like a thunderclap, silencing the crowd. Jasper's jaw dropped. "What did you do, Caleb?" he asked, his voice tight. Caleb looked at his father, then at the ground, his bravado gone. "I just wanted to scare 'em," he mumbled. "Thought if Larson's well went bad, they'd sell cheap, and Pa could buy the land." Elias's face went from red to purple. "You fool!" he barked, grabbing Caleb's arm. "You did this behind my back?" The crowd buzzed, their suspicion shifting from Jasper to the Holts. Lila raised a hand, quieting the chaos. "Hold on," she said. "Caleb, you poured oil in the well to ruin it?" Caleb nodded, head down. "Didn't mean for it to point at Jasper. Just got out of hand." Mrs. Larson's eyes widened, her anger turning to the Holts. "You nearly cost me my homestead," she snapped. Silas Boone stepped in, his voice nervous but firm. "We'll need to talk this over proper, but Jasper's clear. Let's clean this well and settle things." Jasper's knees nearly buckled with relief, but Lila's steady gaze kept him upright. The crowd dispersed, some muttering apologies, others glaring at Caleb as Elias dragged him off. Mrs. Larson approached, her face softer now. "I was wrong about you, Jasper," she said gruffly. You and your lady did right by me." She nodded at Layla, who returned a small smile. As the neighbors left, Jasper and Lila stayed by the well, the morning sun warm on their faces. "You didn't have to take that risk," Jasper said, his voice low, "calling out Caleb in front of everyone." Lila shrugged, her eyes on the horizon. "Wasn't just about you," she said. "I'm tired of folks judging what they don't understand. We're building something here, Jasper, and I'll fight for it." Her words hit him hard, echoing the promise in her letters. A life built on trust, not appearances. Back at the ranch that evening, they sat on the porch, the cedar ring now in Jasper's hand. He'd pulled it from his pocket, its smooth surface catching the lantern light. "I made this for someone I thought I'd meet," he said, voice shaky. "But you're more than I imagined, Lila." She took the ring, testing it on her finger. It stopped at her knuckle, too small, just as he'd feared. But her face lit up with a smile that transformed her strong features. "3 months," Lila said softly, turning the ring in her hand. "You carved this for a stranger, based on nothing but hope and letters." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "That tells me you're someone who cares about the little things, Jasper. Someone who builds with heart, even when no one's watching." Jasper's throat tightened, her words cutting through his doubts. "It don't fit," he said, his voice heavy. "I got it all wrong." Lila handed the ring back, closing his fingers around it. "Rings can be resized," she said. "Character can't. Ask me proper, Jasper. Not because of letters or what folks expect, but because you want to." His heart raced as he looked into her eyes, seeing past her height to the kindness, the strength, the partner he hadn't known he needed. "Lila Kane," he said, voice steady now. "Will you marry me? Not for the ad, but because I think we can build something real together." "Yes," Lila said, her voice simple and sure. "But I got conditions." Jasper's stomach tightened, but her smile was warm. "We resize this ring together. You teach me to work wood, and I'll teach you about cattle and horses. We learn from each other." Relief flooded Jasper, her conditions not demands but a promise of partnership. "I'd like that," he said, his voice thick. "All of it." 6 months later, as fall painted the valley in fiery hues, Jasper and Lila stood in Redstone Creek's small church, their hands joined before the community. The cedar ring, now resized, sat snug on Lila's finger, matched by a band she'd carved for Jasper. Their ranch had flourished. Jasper's careful planning paired with Lila's skill with livestock turned their modest homestead into a thriving operation. Thunder, now secured by a reinforced corral, had sired calves that promised to be strong but tame. The neighbors' whispers had turned to respect, even envy. Jasper and Lila's partnership was unconventional, but it worked. Jasper's patience taught Lila to plan ahead, while her strength showed him new ways to tackle challenges. Elias Holt, once skeptical, stood in the congregation, nodding as they vowed to support each other through whatever lay ahead. The well incident had faded, replaced by a grudging admiration for the couple who'd faced down suspicion and won. The mail-order bride that brought them together was a distant memory, replaced by a bond built on seeing each other for who they were. Jasper had learned strength wasn't just in muscle, and Lila had found a place where her size didn't define her. As they stepped into the autumn light, hand in hand, the crowd cheered, not for a spectacle, but for a partnership that had reshaped their small corner of the frontier. If you loved Jasper and Lila's journey, click the video on your screen for another unforgettable tale of unexpected heroes in the Wild West. Subscribe, hit that bell, and drop a super chat to keep these stories alive. Your support means the world to Badland Saga. Wild West Stories. See you next time, folks.